Hi, my name is Vish Piragunta. I'm the Technical Program Manager of Linaro, and this is Andrei Konovalov. He's one of the developers in LHG. And today I'd like to discuss about the open-embedded work that we're doing in LHG, what we proposed 2 months ago, where we are now, and how this is going to play out, as we get the 96 boards reference platform build, how should we adapt, and so on and so forth. So just as a what I'm going to cover here is basically a brief review of what we presented 2 months ago with the LHGSC, and then when we actually started implementing it, we faced some hurdles. So how did we adapt to the challenges that we had, and discuss about the challenges that we have right now, the advantages that we have right now, and see where we have to go next with this meta RPB or reference platform build. So that's what's we're going to be presenting. So just as a quick review, I mean, the whole big idea, the motivation behind us needing the builds is that if you looked at pre-November 2015, LHG builds were not completely open. So when we wanted to, for example, upstream some patches into Wayland or GStreamer, we posted the patches. But if the maintainers who wanted to review the patches wanted to say, okay, these are the patches, where can I see the build? I want to just run this on a board and actually see it working. We'd be like, okay, you need to sign XYZ's documents, and the maintainers would be, thank you, no thank you. So what we presented, when we looked at, so our objective was, okay, we need to provide public builds for on public platforms so that when we post patches, they have a build that they can go see and actually review the patches and see that working. And at the bottom of it, we're working on key pieces of technology, which is Western Wayland for graphics, GStreamer for multimedia, Opti for security, and Chromium, OpenCDM, and DRM.
There's no such thing as a Yocto release.
Okay. That is why I invited you to the pre-discussion, just to make sure that my terminology is right. So the strategy that we laid out 2 months ago was, okay, we're going to have a in the Linaro repository, there are multiple layers, and we're going to have a Linaro integration already existed by the builds and baselines guys. And basically this was, if we post anything to the open-embedded, open-embedded repository, then while the patches are in flight, the patches would land in Linaro integration. And for projects that do not have an established recipe layer, we would use Linaro. For example, for example, Opti did not have an established repository like Meta Open Embedded, so we would use Linaro layer inside Linaro repository. And we would have another layer, Meta LHG, which is a thin layer to bring the reference builds together for different platforms. That was what we proposed. So, and
what the Meta LHG, is that a BSP layer or not?
No, it's not a. We'll get there. It's slightly evolved. Actually, if you look at the new ones, this is what we proposed. And we've said that we're going to have a master branch that's going to track the open embedded master branch, and we're going to have a release branch for backports. So what we actually ended up with, right? So we now have these 3 layers that we're working with. If you look at the Meta LHG layer, it is a thin layer. Essentially has a, you could say in open embedded terms, it's a distro layer. It basically says, okay, this is how the build is going to look like. It's, for example, for Weston, we are going to use the DRM backend. We're going to use the desktop shell. So, and it's platform independent. And we have the LHG OE manifest. This is just a repository, and each board will have its own XML file, or not each board, but each platform will have its own XML file. And we can take a look at it really quick. And so if you look at the Jethro branch, for example, over here, you'll see that the Dragon Board 410C XML file is here, and it's really just a repo XML manifest to basically say, okay, these are the layers that I'm going to pull for this particular build.
So why does every board has its separate XML file?
Probably it's not necessarily just, we started from that just in case there is some influence from one board support to another.
Right, but you don't. If one board influences the other, you will have differences between builds. So this is not fixing the problem.
No, I mean, like I'm basically saying, so for example, AM57XX pulls Meta TI.
Right.
And Dragonboard builds.
You can include both, because if there's an issue that layers do something different, the issue will be there, regardless if you include them both or not. That's what I'm saying. You're not fixing any problems, you're just creating more confusion.
Right, I think.
So I think this is Android repo-based setup. So it works on manifest, right? So what you could do to improvise is have a common ink file kind of thing, which has all the common layers. Then you can include that in a machine manifest and just do the differentiation that is there in that file, but have all the commons in the include file. That way, at least you can see what is the difference between two. Maybe the manifests are exactly same.
Yeah.
And
so you're saying that, like, say for example, Meta GStreamer 1.0 or Meta Open, Meta browser could be common to all the layers. Then put all the common layers in one XML file. Essentially, is what you're saying.
Right now, only the BSP layers are different. So
yeah. So
it makes sense to merge these XMLs. I haven't done this at the moment.
But what Kun was saying is that you can even add just one anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the way
all the baseball layers.
Yeah.
At the same time. That's fine. That was.
So how the
impact is that somebody will just for TI will also fetch the quadro meta layer. That's a detail. Right. You can have one. Fine.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks. That's good feedback. And then, we have the meta backports, and I just want to clarify on this term, is basically the recipes. So when we started working on this one, on this builds, again, we wanted to provide public builds on public platforms, and it was a little hard to keep up with the OE master all the time. When, for example, our developer, if he's only working on Wayland, it was hard to keep up with everything else that is broken. So what we decided to do is we decided to say, okay, let's stick with Jethro for all the other projects, and for Wayland we might go we'll go forward with the latest Wayland 1.9 that's in Open Embedded Master. Maybe it is Wayland 10 right now or whatnot. But let's stick with, for the rest of the components, let's stick with Jethro build. So the first branch that we started working with was have a Jethro build. And for specific projects like Wayland and GStream or whatnot, we would move to Wayland 1.9. And the way that we did it, I think Nico actually had the first meta backports, and the patch got upstreamed into the meta Open Embedded, and we the patch was backported onto the Jethro branch, so that for that particular specific component, the Wayland component would move to 1.9.
So if you give this presentation, maybe change patches to recipes.
Yeah, patches for the recipes, essentially.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, I just wanted to clarify this term, essentially, because in some cases, when people think about backports, they're using Wayland, say, for example, they're using 1.8. To some people, it means that, hey, I have this DMA buff patch set in Wayland 1.9. A backport actually means just cherry picking that DMA buff patch set from 1.9 and putting it on 1.8. But this is not what the meta backports is. It's actually moving that entire Wayland 1.8 component to 1.9. So it's slightly different. So I just wanted to put it out there because people get confused. And Nico told me that this is backport terms is actually coming from, for example, Debian or something like that. This is what backports means. So just wanted to clarify that term.
Why do you want to keep it separate? Why do you want to move it into meta LHG itself? If you want an override, you can have an override in meta LHG.
We want to use backports in other builds. Not just for the LHG stuff. So we want that to be a generic layer that can be used by anybody. In fact, anybody out there doing Open Embedded or Yocto might be able to reuse the meta backports. It's not something we do just for meta LHG. And the way you do things in general in OE is that you have layers for one specific feature or set of features. So this layer is in fact, it was not even done for you guys. I mean,
Yeah.
we did it for some other reasons inside Linaro, and you realized that it was useful for you, so it came this way.
The really goal of the Meta LHG. So the goal of the Meta LHG is basically provide the components that enables to build additional deliveries that we do in LHG, the security-related work, graphics-related work. So that's what we focusing inside of that. And from that point of view, the Meta Backports is not necessarily tied to concrete use cases.
So I think I have one kind of suggestion about so there is this RPB manifest right now available, right? So probably you should kind of think of whether you really need the LHG OE manifests, or you can just consolidate into the RPB manifests.
This is a panning.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. So and similarly, I mean, we discussed even about even the Meta LHG stuff should be merged into the Meta RPB. I mean, that's we discussed. I mean, offline, but
yeah. So I think Meta LHG probably
may
disappear.
It may disappear.
Or
and
there
just
are
become
things maybe that might. I mean, you might still need Meta LHG for some of the components that you do, or some of the customization, anything.
Right.
But there are things in Meta LHG that are actually RPB materials that should be in the RPB layer.
Right. So maybe the definition of Meta. Sorry. The definition of Meta LHG should state different what it is stating right now.
Yeah, so basically, think about I'm going to get Meta RPB and I'm going to probably use a particular configuration to build. And for the LHG RPB, so they're all going to make sure that they're using the DRM backend, they're using the desktop shell, and so on and so forth, right? So yeah, we'd be glad to get rid of layers. That'd be awesome. So where are we with this? So with this complete re-architecture of the way that we build things, we have the Dragon board 410C, we have the LOF Western image. So just a little bit of explanation about the Western image. If you look at the core image Western in Meta Open Embedded, it has both Western Wayland and GStreamer, except that this LOF Western image only has Western Wayland, so that we could bring up one thing at a time. And the image is Western Wayland plus GStreamer, and the Chromium image, LOF Chromium image is Chromium plus GStreamer plus Western Wayland. So we have all these three builds working with the Dragon 410C. We're going to demo that on Friday, and we wanted to make sure that these works with multiple boards. So we currently have it working with the BKK16 with the LOF Western image with Pixman renderer, and we're working with TI to get it to work take advantage of the hardware accelerator. And HiKey, so this is what is in the repository. So if you just go to the LHG OE manifest, this is what you can build today. So and it's the cool thing about this is if somebody just goes and I want to build for the Dragon board 410C, they just read the README file. They literally can just use these instructions to build for whatever the board they want. So the instructions for building it and flashing it are all in the README file, right? So
there already is like 96 boards on GitHub.
Right.
Right. So and then this has another.
So yeah. So how do we deal with that? Like, for example.
My thing is like as a consumer of it, right? I want a consistent message, right?
Right.
Coming in from Linaro, so everything is.
Right. That's also going to be a side effect of us getting rid of Meta LHG and putting into the RPB, right?
Yeah, and again, because we talked offline about that, this work has been done in parallel of us working on the OE RPB. So I mean, we cannot blame you for not using that because first it doesn't exist yet.
Right.
But we are going to work to make sure that from the outside of Linaro, every open embedded related deliverable should give a similar user experience and so on. And everything that will come out, I mean, whether it's LHG, LNG, hopefully LEG, the Qualcomm landing team, everything we do will look the same and similar, and we are all going to use the same RPB, methodologies.
Right.
That's for sure. And that will include the manifest, things that we will share as much as possible through Meta Backports and Meta RPB. And something you didn't mention is the setup scripts as well. I mean, we will also have to make sure that we all use the same build scripts.
Actually, this is what the setup scripts will.
I know.
Yeah, it has. So we need to figure out how do we put that into the.
But again, we are doing it right now for Open OERPB, so we cannot blame you for not using what doesn't exist yet.
Yes.
But at next Connect, we might be able to blame you for that.
Yeah, the target is right after disconnect to start like wrapping up this work and hopefully have like quite a lot of progress over the next like couple of months.
Yeah, that's good. So that lives the philosophy of OE as well, where you are generating a distro for every one of them, so you can have the infra in one place.
Yeah, so somebody should be able to buy the high keyboard or Dragon board and basically just go to the main thing, and I want the LHG flavor of it or whatever, and then they just follow the instructions. That's the big idea.
So you have like bifurcated infrastructure and then try to combine.
And the Havers platform could mean a Havers platform for the home group, for the network group, and whatever other work.
That's where the power comes.
Right.
And all this methodology will actually be, there is a talk from Koen at next ELC to talk about what we've set up and how we want things to go moving forward for Open Embedded at Linaro.
Right. And one question that I do have for the RPB is, got to realize that if you look at LHG, they're working on multimedia components. So they need graphics acceleration, hardware acceleration, they need multimedia acceleration. So if we need to upstream patches on Wayland or GStreamer, we have to have those use cases working. So one of the concerns that we do have is if you insist on a kernel upgrade, and that particular kernel upgrade does not have that, then we might have to do something else in terms of like the kernel.
We don't
for
want to force you requirements. We want instead like for you to come and work in the same place basically. So you still have the possibility of driving the requirements. It's just to have like one single common place, like where everyone could see what Linaro is actually doing.
I mean, what you're asking is more what is going to be the kernel for the high key, which is different from how the RPB. I mean, the RPB is a set of tools, methodologies, and process that we put around the builds that we want to do with OE. What you're asking is just to make sure that you want someone to support a kernel for your needs. So that's kind of a different issue.
Right. So I think that's a compromise or a challenge piece that you have to deal with. Probably we won't solve it here, but that's a challenge you're going to get to have solved and be considerate of the use cases of other groups and thereby achieve the consolidation. So just don't have one use case in your mind where you say, okay, everything has to be this way.
It's because, like, for example, the benefit of the Havers kernel is that you would gain a lot of stuff as well as part of it. We're doing QA, we're testing, we're having more features.
Exactly.
So if you can work on that tree, it's better for everyone. But if you can't, for whatever specific reason, that's fine as well.
No, I think that you could still work on the same tree, but you can have your own VBA pens or recipes for the kernel.
I mean, one of the limitations I know, for example, TI, they're working with 4.4 this year, right? And they will only enable hardware acceleration for multimedia on 4.4 for this year, right? So if you ask them, go to 4.5, and that's not LTS, it's not going to be enabled. So I don't see how you can enforce, okay, you have to go to 4.5.
Which is why we don't want.
Yeah, so just so you know our use case, right?
Yeah, I think there are general use cases even in Yocto. They support 3 kernels, 2 kernels at least, right? That's exactly to solve these kind of conflicting requirements in some cases, if you will. So you always have a bleeding kernel, then you have a stable kernel. So people or distros that you spin out of this infra can choose which one they want.
So from my point of view, actually, what would be quite important also on the kernel is kind of define a set of test cases maybe that would, test if certain functionalities are enabled working for a given use case, like for LHG builds and so on. So we can, let's say if we upgrade to 4.5, we run the test set, we know that, all right, DRM, KMS is working, some subsystem is working or not working. Is this suitable for LHG or not? We get a list of items which are broken, and then we can, plan what to do with that. Because right now, after an update, we're just fixing bugs and bugs as they come without, knowing what is missing at that point. Yeah, for Wayland Weston, yes, there is a set of DRM KMS functionalities which are used. Also for GStreamer, we can define those cases. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure those can.
We are very weak on the testing side of things, so any feedback you can send that to us. And
Right.
The more we can test, the better it is.
And also, like, in case of Wayland, in this case.
We want to also make sure that, for example, you have the requirement to use Wayland, right? Which is the next, like technology that we want to use. If we can align that as well with the other builds that we have, for example, the Debian build, we should do that, like, so we can extract and test the same stack, basically. So the more that kind of we get your requirements, then the more that we can align as well, not only through tests, but if we can like try to make the other builds as well closer to what we as Linaro need, better for everyone as well.
So, channeling my inner Milos, if you have a test case, make sure you have someone who cares about it and fixes it, because QA deleted a lot of test cases because they have been failing for years and no one cared and they kept testing it. So be considerate.
I mean, it's for LHG case, it's pretty simple, because if we, for example, if you just look at the Chromium image, right? If you open YouTube and cannot play it, we'll know it very quickly. So
yes,
there are good ways of knowing if something doesn't work.
I think it's just removing the thing and having tests for having tests.
Right.
Instead of testing what we care and
right.
keep maintaining them.
Right.
So we have a daily test cases that run about 500 test cases that trigger graphics, multimedia, and some product level test cases automatically, including Wayland, Western, GStreamer, and whatnot. We can probably share that with you. We can make it public. I don't think anything TA specific there.
Let's talk later.
So yeah, this was just a review of why we had to work with Jethro and just move specific components to the latest layer, and more clarity on the meta backports terminology. So what are the advantages, right? If you look at what this has been, we've been able to do, is when I started in September, October last year to actually just get a build. Hey, I said, Mark, I want this build. So I got the instructions from the time that I got a B2120 board to the time that I actually was able to successfully play a video. It took me 30 days. And by that time, I had some idea about Open Embedded. I'm not an expert in Open Embedded by any means, as Kuhn will acknowledge. But it took me that much time. When this got done, and I just had to go to that, I just had to go to the repository. I just had to go to the LHG manifest, and I just followed the instructions on a README file, and I was able to, build the Dragon board fairly simply in less than a day. So that is the impact that this particular rebuilding effort has provided us. If you go talk to any developer in LHG, he will basically say, last year, it took us this long to just get a build to work, right? Santosh, if you're here, right? You can acknowledge to that. So that was the advantage, and now we have a public repository, so if you post some patches, and if somebody needs to just get this board and see these patches working, they can, right? So obviously, what this provides us is, if say, for example, I'm working on Wayland project, it gets me to Wayland 1.9, but it does not get me to Wayland master. So that's, at least it gets me to the latest version possible with Open Embedded. So that's one of the limitations. Like if you look at the disadvantages, I presented saying that, okay, this is what we have. So if I'm posting patches, I can basically say, okay, use this generic build, you'll at least get the framework to work, and just make this change in the recipe, and you'll get it to the, my branch, basically. Instead of using this Wayland 1.9, use my particular branch. And one of the things that Nico suggested was, if I understand correctly, is have in the meta LHG right now, have the distro configuration to override instead of getting Wayland 1.9, you could just make a small parameter change for specifically that project to get the latest Wayland master, So that's what Nico suggested just before the meeting. So that way, any specific component we can, like say for example, we could have a bleeding or some LHG bleeding or some configuration like that where it will get you to the master of, Wayland and, or, our branch on git.linaro.org where we're working on that work in progress Wayland and work in progress GStreamer. We can just pull those so that they can get to the latest work in progress branches.
So is this for component development or for SDK development or just to get a test case out? So what is the goal? Because you say we want something stable to test our work with and as well have the leading edge of everything.
So okay, so this is, if I think about it, it's for the guy who's developing a feature on Wayland or developing a feature on GStreamer, right? Okay, I get it to work. So with this build, right, if I just buy a 96 boards and if I just get a 96 boards and do this build, it'll get me to Wayland 1.9. I do small changes, it gets me to Wayland tip or my current working progress branch. I post the patches on the mailing list, and I send the instructions in the mailing list saying that, hey, this is how you just get a 96 boards and a build, and do this slight modification, you'll just get my build from my working progress tree just in case.
Do you want to make builds out of that? I mean, or it's just for developers?
It's for developers, really. I mean, it's for the maintainer, right? I mean, if there were a lot of cases where the maintainer said, okay, I saw this patch, I want to see it working on this board.
Do you want to take these patches that you have developed and backport them into the 1.9, the 1.9 Wayland?
I mean, I wouldn't do that when it's in flight. I mean, I'd let it actually make it upstream before we backport it, right? I mean, so the backporting part we haven't even tackled at this particular point of time, right?
And so why do you need the builds then? I mean, so who is going to use the build which does not have Wayland 1, the latest Wayland?
Yeah, I think if you are working upstream, in this case what you are really talking about is you are trying to develop that component, be Wayland or any of those.
Right.
That's a separate use case, and as Kun was saying. But if you want to tackle that, it's good. But I don't think that your end users would care for that as much. What I mean to say there is that, for example, if you are, people will use a released version of Wayland, right? They will say, we need 1.9.
Right.
Now, if you say, I need to also have a recipe for Wayland Git, which is like, tracking the tip of the tree every day.
No, that's not, no, we were not going to track the tip of the work every day. Say, for example, there's a maintainer, right? The way that I look at it is there's the Wayland maintainer.
Yeah, he has to track it.
And he basically, I'm posting a particular patch, and he wants to see that work, first of all. That patch,
yes.
How did you test this, right? And I can just send him this build plus, hey, just make this modification when you're doing the bit bake. And you will see my working progress branch working on this board. That's really what this is for, at least the first part of it. Now, how is this going to be used on a product is where the backporting comes into picture, right? Whether we want to
So essentially, that's the component development that I mentioned, what you are describing essentially. So that's a separate thing. Probably you can handle it. It's a good thing to do.
Right.
Right. But even if you follow, obviously you need to have to do your patch on the upstream and then push it to upstream wherever you're trying to do it. Right. Whether that activity is part of this or not, I don't think that is must.
Yeah. When we talked about it, I didn't realize that was the use case. So if you don't want to integrate these patches into your builds, maybe there are better options. I mean, you can actually, when you build OE, you can actually say for this recipe, this is my component that I develop, and I don't want you to go and fetch the source from anywhere. Yeah. I have the source on my laptop. They are here. Use this one instead of going on the internet to fetch anything. So that's a bit, if it's just a use case for a single developer developing one component, that is better than actually what we discussed before.
Okay.
So there are workflows for that in Open Embedded already. They can just follow those workflows. You don't have to be worried about those.
So yeah, so you're basically saying leave it at Wayland 1.9 and have this side channel just for the maintainer, and he knows what he's doing.
You can say this component, don't worry about the source. I have already the source. I have run the git trees, I've patched everything. So use this folder to build and not the...
And yeah, so okay.
So another good thing if you are trying to do that, just probably out of context, but they can use like DevTool, for example, right? Which has this facility where it will be able to get the latest sources, right? Apply your patch, and then you can try those two things out using DevTool. So developers essentially working on component development can have that kind of workflows.
Yeah, they know how to use it. I mean,
yeah, they have to know, or you can basically recommend, use this way, but
yeah.
there is no need to probably carry any
Right.
recipes or any standard workflow that is different than what is out there already.
Right.
That's
Because
my take.
the recipes for the tracking the master is work.
It's work,
The
okay.
additional one, and it can
So if the maintainer is the only target you have, you don't really have to complicate the process. Just do that one off, and you'll be better off.
We can talk offline about it to explain to you how
Right.
you can do that, but there is a better way.
Okay.
You don't have to make your own recipes for that.
Okay.
It's too much work for what you want to do.
Okay, all right, that's good.
So I think the one use case that probably maybe you covered is you might need a forward port.
I'm sorry?
Forward port or something, right? So forward port meaning that somebody is using, a X version of whatever version which was in Yocto 2.0, and then, you are basing off of, so say Jethro is 2.0, and then the prior release, right? They're tied to a component for whatever reason.
Right.
They can't upgrade.
So yes, we'll talk about that right now.
Okay.
I mean, so far it's just two audiences, right? I mean, so
That's a meta forward port.
So yeah, we're talking about two different audiences. So I completely agree with, hey, let's get, at least what this gets us is, to the Wayland 1.9, whatever is being used by Open Embedded Master Branch. And then if somebody just really wants the bleeding edge, what was recommended to summarize is that just do that one off. It's too much work to actually get the recipes for it and do it in a much more standardized way. Great. So now okay, so that's good. So the only other thing is we haven't really discussed about how the backports, in terms of when I say for example, a company is, when we first proposed this, we were going to have a master branch and a backports branch, or the release branch or whatnot. Now that is really up to the LHG SC, because say for example, Comcast or TI or one of the members this year, they first need to have an agreement on what is going to be, what is it that they're going to ship. Like say for example, TI decides that it's going to be Jethro or is it Yocto 2.0 release? What do you call it, please?
I just call it an OE release.
Okay, OE release. Okay, OE 2.0 Jethro release. And if another member decides, okay, it's going to be 1.9 release or 2.1 release, it's going to be difficult to, if there's a particular feature, to basically backport that feature to a 1.8 and also a 1.9 depending upon that particular release. So that is something that the LHG SC needs to come together and say, hey, what is our strategy going to be for 2016, 2017 timeframe, and at what times, and there needs to be an agreement. So that's the reason why we haven't even started working on that one yet.
But that's analogous to a landing team saying we'll stick with 3.10 for
Right.
next year. If they want to be stupid and use old versions, they should do the work.
Right.
Within reason.
Right. So it's basically with the resources that we have.
Yeah.
I mean, based on the resources we have, all I can say is that if we get from multiple members, I want to, my products are going to be based on OE Jethro, and another company comes and says our companies are based on 2.1, or we haven't decided, we'll decide in May. We just don't have the resources to backport to that many versions of Wayland. So please be mindful of that. So really, that's all I had. I mean, just wanted to discuss.
So yeah, one thing that you didn't probably talk about is whether you're going to track the releases.
I'm sorry?
You're going to track the OE releases, for example, or no?
So that's the question, right? Which release exactly? Like say for example, we have this particular feature that we upstreamed into Wayland tip right now. But if say for example there is a some half of the members say we want OE 1.9, and other member says, oh, we have to stick to OE 2.0, that basically means that feature has to be backported to two versions of Wayland, maybe 1.6 and 1.8, or 1.8 and 1.9, and that's going to be very, very difficult, right? But at least, this gives you a framework for, okay, you use these commands, you get to Wayland 1.9. At least that is there with these builds.
You should branch anyway. So whichever branch you have, vetted the layers against, You branch them anyway.
Right.
Because you have to move forward.
Right. We have to keep moving forward
Yes,
to
so
the latest one.
correct.
At least it solves one problem.
Yes.
Now the production problem and all that work, we have to deal with it
Yeah.
at the LHGSE level. Any other questions?
I think, regarding to moving forward with the OE branches, I believe what's important that some of the work where we're focusing, like Secure Datapad, Chromium, Wayland, that we're pushing to be as close as master, and as we are doing that, we should always update to the corresponding OE branches as well. So
that's very similar to what I showed you with Wayland,
exactly.
right? I mean, so the one question that I have for I guess Kuhn is not here, but what do we do with OptE? When we proposed OptE, OptE, the whole infrastructure for the user space library and the components, it was not available. It's not part of the Meta Open Embedded per se. So we said that for these kind of projects that does not have an established recipe home layer, we're going to put it in the Meta LHG layer of the. We are going to put it in the Meta LHG. So now that TE driver is getting close to mainline, are we going to just stick to that strategy, or are we going to?
Yeah, you could just follow what Upstream does in general. Like if it is used by more than one use case, so within Linaro, if OptE is being used by others, right? And it's not Upstream, so you choose one of your common layers and you put it there.
Yeah.
If it is very specific to LHG, put it in LHG layer and wait there, let it simmer, and keep working Upstream.
Once it becomes Upstream, then it actually can.
And you move to Upstream, to that version of kernel and user space, whichever.
So when the TE driver does make it Upstream,
Yes.
would Meta Open Embedded accept the, OptE as one of the projects, just like GStreamer or?
You can, so Meta Open Embedded is general
Yes.
infrastructure, right? So if you can say, well, this is not specific, which, you can argue, basically they look for general use cases. Then there are separate layers for security. So, they may even suggest, okay, you have a separate layer for this or whatever. But I cannot promise you that, you will get it into Meta Open Embedded for that matter. It depends on use case.
So I mean, so basically at that particular point of time, the TE driver and the OptE driver, let's just say that in another month or two, hopefully, it is Upstream. Then we can say, hey, this is now a generic Linux component that is Upstream, and this is a way. These are the user space libraries and applications that you would need to make it work, and this is a reference. This is an implementation. So I would think that would be a strong use case for Meta Open Embedded, right?
Yeah, that definitely can be. As long as it is it generic enough, where you can being it in kernel Upstream is a good enough statement. However, those libraries, they have to be generic too.
So what you're saying is it's going to take time.
Yes.
To get there. So in the meantime, just follow our strategy of put it in Meta LHG and get it from there.
Or if there is more than LHG needing it, then put it in your RPMB layer, for example.
Oh no, Meta Linaro, sorry.
Yeah, Meta Linaro layer.
Yeah, Meta Linaro.
Also, once the OptE drivers are once the OptE drivers are upstreamed into the kernel, OE already generates the corresponding kernel module package. So that means that in your build, even there is no upstream, code in OE, you can depend on the OptE driver directly.
But he's saying there is a user space component.
Exactly.
So for those, you have to have a place. And so initially, so think of this as a single kind of a infrastructure. You have kernel pieces, you have user land pieces and stuff. And then kernel pieces has a upstream, which is the Linux kernel. And you're working on upstreaming. As it gets upstreamed, you remove it from your layer wherever you're hosting it, right? And similarly, if your user space pieces have an upstream, let's say you modified core utils, I don't know why, but I'm just taking an example, right, to support OptE, okay? And then you worked with core code utils upstream and they accepted it, you remove it from here.
Yes.
So it is at that point transparent to Open Embedded or any Open Embedded infra.
So just maintain it in Metal Linaro, and then
yes,
when
now,
this gets yeah.
Now, if you have utilities that are specific to Opti, which are the upstream, like Linaro is the upstream for those, right? You might have those utilities. So for those, you should have things in Metal Linaro. That's where the Metal Linaro is for. So Metal Linaro is actually also a umbrella layer. Now within Metal Linaro, your maintainers will tell you, hey, this is something which should be a sub-layer underneath. So they may say, okay, create a meta opti or whatever. Or they may say, oh, these are not that way. We just put it in, the Metal Linaro _ Metal Linaro layer, right? So that is the discussion you have to have with them. But that's where the right place is. That's right now.
Okay, so just stick to the plan, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my suggestion would be put it in Metal Linaro security, something like that. Keep all the security related stuff in Metal Linaro security or Meta Opti.
So in Metal Linaro, they just have another Metal Linaro Opti.
Correct.
Yeah, that was the plan.
Yeah, and the other suggestion would be the beta backports. Do you want to rename it as beta upstream or something like that? Because it's not really backport.
Generally, we call such layers as meta staging or something, but it's not a very fancy name. But it says both of those.
Yeah, that's still fine. But because backport is a little confusing name, and you have to explain it every time.
I understand. So yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll have to look at that.
Yeah. What you're doing happens all the time. Some patches may not be there in Fido or Jethro, and you have to pull it from some recipes. I'm sorry, some recipes will be in master. You need to pull it from master to your respective branch. That happens all the time in OE and Yocto. So you may just want to call it by different name. If you have an SDK, just say it's Meta Linaro SDK.
Okay. Okay. All right, thanks. Thanks, everybody.